It has been a very rough week for our country. Just like you, I have been home. I have been watching the news. I witnessed George Floyd get murdered on social media. I saw the reports of Breonna Taylor being executed in her home, in her bed, sleeping next to her partner. I also saw Ahmaud Arbery get shot in the back and killed because two vigilante citizens felt that they had the right to take this man's life in the name of protecting their community. It's all just too much at this point. And like many of you, I am angry. I am sad. I am hurt. My heart breaks, not only for the senseless loss of life, for the fact that these individuals' lives were taken from them, stolen from them senselessly, but my heart breaks for the families who now have to continue living a life without these people who they love. And it's a lot. And frankly, it's too much. And at what point do we, as a country, as human beings, say enough is enough, regardless of what color we are, regardless of our religious belief? Like, at what point do we step out of the labels that we attach to ourselves and look at each other as human beings and decide and demand that these things are no longer going to happen? This is embedded in the fabric of this country. It's no longer acceptable to remain silent when it comes to acts of injustice. We can no longer allow racism to plague our country. It's no longer acceptable to say that if it is not happening to me directly, it's not important. All of us together have to unite, and we have to say that enough is enough. We have to be vocal in our disappointment. We have to express our anger. We have to express our rage. And it's not to say that we have to be violent in the way that we're expressing that, but we can no longer remain silent. And that goes for every single one of us. If we are not actively working towards change, then we are active participants in the continued manifestation of these injustices. There is so much going on around us. We see people taking to the streets. We see people voicing their anger and their outrage. And it's important to understand that the majority of people who are out there are peacefully protesting. And there are provocateurs, antagonizers, people that are amidst the peaceful protesters whose sole job is to cause unrest and to incite violence so that it can distract us and everyone who's watching from the very thing that we're trying to bring awareness to. Because if we start talking about the rioting and the looting and the burning, right? The burning down of these businesses, if we start talking about that, then we stop talking about the senseless murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the Ahmaud Arbery's and all of these individuals who have lost their lives as a result of police brutality. So I encourage you to not be distracted by the violence. And let's be clear. If we are out on the front lines and if we are protesting and if we are being peaceful and we see individuals trying to incite violence and are rioting and are harming and looting these businesses, then we as peaceful protesters have an obligation to stop those individuals, because they are taking away from our fight and they are taking away from what we are trying to fight against. And I will tell you that it took me a really long time to understand Dr. Martin Luther King's non-violent stance to social justice and racial equality. And as a Christian, I can now recognize why his movement was so important. Because the only way we're going to combat hate is by loving each other. Returning hate with more hate is going to perpetuate more hate. It's going to continue the cycle of hate. And so if we want to change the hateful behaviors of those who want to keep Black people oppressed, the only way we can do that is by infusing love into them. That's the only way we can change our hateful heart. We can only do it through love. Meeting violence with more violence is not going to change the violent behavior. We have to meet violence with nonviolence. And I understand that when we have no other way, or when we believe that there's no other outlet to express our anger and our outrage and our frustration, that we feel the only way for us to be heard is through the violence. That violence is the only way to make people pause and really listen. Not saying that it's right, because I unequivocally denounce violence, but I understand why it happens. I understand why people, when they are tired of peacefully taking a knee during sports events to raise awareness, and people are bothered by that. People are offended by that because they view the taking of a knee as being disrespectful to the American flag, when they're missing the point, when it's never really been about the flag, but it's been about the systematic oppression of Black people in this country. When Colin Kaepernick takes a knee, it's to bring awareness to the continuous abuse of power by law enforcement and the police brutality that has been happening in this country for years. It's to bring awareness for the Abner Louimas, the Amadou Diallos, the Rodney Kings, okay? It's not just about George Floyd, it's about all of those people, Black people who have been murdered for years at the hand of law enforcement. And I will tell you that what's happening right now, what's been happening in this country for the past week, gives me hope that change is coming, because it's the first time that I've seen officers, whole police precincts and departments denounce police brutality. It's the first time that I've seen these chiefs say that they stand against police brutality. And I think that that is a first step. Because the first step of change is recognizing that there's a problem. And so the fact that these law enforcement officers are finally standing up and recognizing the problem that exists within their own departments, I think it's important. And I think that we need to see more law enforcement agencies do that. They have to stand beside the people that they have sworn to protect. We can no longer protect the bad cops and the bad apples. It's not enough to charge them, right? They have to be prosecuted. They have to be convicted. And every time an officer abuses their power, it's the responsibility of those quote unquote good cops to call it out. You can't protect your partners anymore, because that protection is what is contributing to this systematic killing of Black people. And we all have to say enough is enough. We have to use our voices. We have to use our platforms in whatever way we can use them. And it's not to say that you have to be out on the front lines. You don't have to be out there protesting. There are so many different ways to advocate and to be a voice and to be an ally and to affect change. And whatever that means for you, it's your responsibility to do that. We can no longer sit silent and let everybody else fight this fight. This has to be a personal fight. This has to be your fight as much as it is mine, as much as it is for that Black person and for the families of Black people who are getting murdered. And every time we see their perpetrators get off and continue with their lives and they're back on the streets and they're given the power to do it again, we have to stop it. And I'm passionate about this because I am married to a Black man. I am raising Black children. And no, I am not a Black person. I'm a brown person, and I recognize that. But just because I'm not Black does not mean that this is not my fight. This is my fight as much as it should be your fight. And as a Christian, the Bible tells us that we have a responsibility to stand up for the weak, for the oppressed, and for those who are continuously being subjected to injustices. We have a responsibility to advocate for them, to speak for them, to fight for them. So if you call yourself a Christian, this is not the time for you to be silent. This is the time for you to stand and be an ally and stand beside our Black brothers and sisters and say, I'm with you and I see you and I'm going to fight for you and with you, because until we're all free, nobody is free. And Martin Luther King had a dream back in the 1960s, and his dream still hasn't been realized. And it's not enough that we had a Black president in the White House. Okay, because when Obama was the president, we still saw the racism that he encountered while he was sitting in the highest office in this country. We have to stop sitting by and believing that this is not our issue. This is our issue. This is an American issue. And until we dismantle this system, it's always going to be an issue. It's not enough to change the system. We have to break this system down and rebuild a new one. Because that system was built on oppression. This country was built on slavery and racism and on keeping people separate, specifically making people believe that the Black race was inferior and that the white race was superior. So that's what this system was built upon. So this system no longer works for this country. We need to dismantle this system and build a new one. And the way we do that is by getting involved, by using our voices, by going out there and voting. Don't let people tell you that your vote doesn't matter, that your voice doesn't matter. Okay, because voting, if it wasn't important, there would not be an entire group of people trying to suppress our votes, trying to deny us from the rights that we have been given. Your vote matters. Your voice matters. And now more than ever, it's so important that we exercise our voting power. We are in a voting season. This is an election year. And I need you, your family members, your friends, everyone who is of legal age to vote, to go out there and vote. If you want change, if you want real change, if you want to start dismantling this broken system, voting is how you do that. So encourage everyone you know to get out to the polls. If you have friends who are not registered to vote, make sure that they get registered. If you're turning 18 before November, register and make sure that on November 6th, you're out there in the polls exercising your right and you're using your voice and you're voting those people out of office who are against you and your rights and equality and equal justice for everyone. We can no longer support politicians who don't use their privilege and their positions of power to affect change for all of us in this country. We have to get out there and we have to do it peacefully. Rioting and looting and burning, it's going to get us attention, but it's going to get us the wrong attention. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that we're not taking the attention away from our fight. And if you see someone looting and rioting and trying to burn down the businesses in your community, you have a responsibility to stop that. Because while I am not putting capitalism over the lives of individuals, we have to remember that these businesses provide jobs for people in the community. They provide necessary services and essential items and products for the people who live in these communities. So it's important that we don't tear those businesses down. There are other ways for us to exercise our voice and our power. And I challenge you today to do whatever you can with what you have to facilitate change in your community. I pray for each and every person on the front line who is using their voice loudly and boldly to bring awareness to the social injustices and the racial injustices that are happening in this country. You are all in my prayers. Use your voice, use your power. It's your responsibility.